You really do.
Let's go to the growing questions over what has inspired President Trump's 2 days of public tirades against special counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Yesterday, Trump tweeted, "Universities will someday study what highly conflicted and not Senate-approved Bob Mueller and his gang of Democrat thugs have done to destroy people."
Okay,
Why? Stop right there.
This is too easy. This is too easy.
Fix it.
So, Mika, do you know what university would be studying this if it had not already been shut down by the proper authorities?
It's too much of a hanging curveball, though. Joe, don't do it. You're above this. It's too easy, Joe. Don't do the Trump University thing.
You just did it for me, Donnie. That's why you're here. Yes,
God.
They would do it
Donnie.
at Trump University, Donnie, but nowhere else. So Mika, he goes on talking about crooked Hillary, Comey, McCabe, Lisa Page, and her lover,
Joe,
Peter
he's getting the questions from Mueller and freaking out. Like, I know that one cannot make that connection, but one can certainly surmise that at the time the questions from the Mueller probe are coming into this White House, at the time the Democrats have control and the president is finally being educated to the fact that there is nothing he can do when he's compelled to hand over his tax returns and answer questions. At the time that the president finally realizes that the first time in his life he is cornered and there's nowhere to go, and perhaps at the time one might surmise that perhaps his son is potentially on the list of those who might be indicted, that this president is freaking out.
The only reason you would surmise that is because
I'm just surmising.
There are reports that Don Jr. has actually told friends he may be indicted in the next couple of weeks. And of course, that freak out came a few hours after the president claimed to know the inner workings of the Mueller investigation, saying they had no collusion, which of course is ridiculous. They've gone absolutely nuts. They're screaming and shouting at people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This reminds me, Susan Del Percio, of what John Heilman said, is that almost everything that Donald Trump blurts out on his Twitter feed is either projection or confessional.
It's exactly right, Joe. It is, and it would be laughable if it wasn't just so pathetic, frankly. And to have a president of the United States spinning out of control and focused only on himself and not on our country at this point is devastating. We have the G20 coming up. We have North Korea testing missiles again. We have a lot of things going on, and this president is strictly wrapped up in himself, and he is spinning out of control.
And so why is he doing that? Well, Mika mentioned it. Just as the president's lawyers said they were preparing Trump's final responses to Bob Mueller's written questions, which the special counsel submitted weeks ago. The president spent more than 4 hours meeting with attorneys Monday and 90 minutes Wednesday night. That's according to people familiar with the Sessions, who tell the Washington Post. Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani and others briefed on the questions tell the paper there are at least 24 questions, all of which relate to activities and episodes from before President Trump's election. Quote, "There are some that create more issues for us legally than others," Giuliani said, adding that some were unnecessary, some were possible traps, and we might consider some as irrelevant. And more evidence that the special counsel appears to be at the front of the president's mind, as displayed in the transcript of his Wednesday interview with the Daily Caller. The president was asked about the appointment of acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. President Trump quickly shifted to talking about Bob Mueller, saying this: "Whitaker is just somebody that's very respected. I knew him only as he pertained, as he was with Jeff Sessions. And, look, as far as I'm concerned, this is an investigation that should never have been brought. It should never been had. It's something that should have never been brought. It's an illegal investigation." It's very interesting because when you talk about not Senate confirmed, well, Mueller's not Senate confirmed. That answer being compared to President Trump's May 2017 response to a question about the firing of FBI Director James Comey.
When I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
So, Joe, go back to the Daily Caller interview. The president is asked about acting Attorney General Whitaker and finds his way almost immediately to the Mueller investigation.
He just walks into it. Why don't like maybe for Christmas this year, so somebody can just get a stamp and just make it a lot easier for him that says obstruction on it and just stamp it on his forehead, because it's so obvious. You look at what he said there. You look at what he said, like as you said, to Lester Holt, what he told the Russian foreign minister, what he told the Russian ambassador to the United States about the firing of Comey. I mean, this guy, Donnie, he obstructs in plain light. You don't have to be Hillary Queen.
It's all on tape.
You don't have to be Sherlock. Like, he obstructs in the light of day.
The absurd moves he makes, I think, will get heightened. You know, we're seeing a different guy now. Donald Trump a few weeks ago was scary. You know, he was, I always say he was like a Bond villain. He was like Goldfinger. And now he's more like Dr. Evil, where he comes on, and instead of getting angry, you kind of almost chuckle. There's a patheticness to him that's starting to show that hasn't been there in the past. Donald Trump has always been, Susan used the word, in control. Even in the lowest part of his life, when there was the bankruptcy, you know, when you're a company and you're bankrupt, you still own the banks. You know, in a strange way, he said, here, take the keys. You still, so he's never not been in control. And we're going to see now a caged animal, and I think we're going to see behavior so much more aberrant than anything we've seen. If you just watch this man, there's a great old movie, The Seduction of Joe Tynan. I don't know if you remember this, with Alan Alda. And there's this old character who plays an old Congressman, Melvin Douglas, who at some point to the camera starts talking French at a congressional hearing. I think we're going to start to see in the coming weeks something happen with Donald Trump on camera. Some tweets go to a new level that even Republicans are going to start to come out from under the rocks.
Yeah, I think so. And John Meacham, we've had a discussion time and again, you and I, Mika, talking about whether the institutions would hold. The institutions have held. Most importantly, voters went out and provided the ultimate Madisonian check on Donald Trump's power with their vote last week. But it's happening everywhere. You look at a federal judge. We're going to be talking about this story in a minute. You look at a federal judge. I guess it was yesterday in the D.C. Circuit, who was asked by the Trump administration to deal a setback to the Mueller investigation and throw out some charges. The federal judge, appointed by Donald Trump, refused and said they've done nothing wrong. I think, again, maybe when you do the Soul of America Part 2, maybe the Soul of America's institutions, they have not been found wanting as of yet, have they?
They haven't yet, and that's why, you know, my money's on Madison, not Twitter. And I might lose, unquestionably, but I do believe that there's a resilience and a durability to the rule of law, and also to, I think, ultimately the popular pressure. As you know better than anybody, Congress is far more often a mirror of who we are rather than a molder. And my sense is that, particularly with the new House of Representatives, and I would imagine a Republican Senate caucus that would at least be looking at things like the Orange County results, looking at the results from the past week or two and saying, you know what, we hooked our wagon to this guy, but we don't want to have that wagon go straight off the cliff with the entire Trump organization speaking Russian instead of French. And so I just wonder, you know, remember all the people who've been with Donald Trump. You know, if you were with Ronald Reagan, if you were with Nixon, you were with George W. Bush, you were there because you believed to some extent in the person as well. Trump's official base, the people in Washington, are hired hands. They're not true believers, it seems to me. And the congressional base lives in fear of him, but fear is not going to, I think, if fear is what's driving them, fear of their voters ultimately is going to be more compelling than fear of Trump himself. And we might be beginning to see that.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.